It's the kind of news that stops you in your tracks when the headlines first hit. In March 2024, it didn't feel real. Garrison Brown, funny, sharp, protective, and once full of dreams, was gone. The son of Janelle and Cody Brown, the same Garrison who had grown up before our eyes on Sister Wives, was suddenly no longer with us. He was just 25, and for anyone who's been following the show all these years, that loss wasn't just a shock, it was devastating, because this wasn't just about the death of a reality TV personality. This was about a young man who was hurting and a family that had been breaking apart long before that final moment. Hi friends, I'm Helena, and welcome back to TLC's Sister Wives News. If you're here, you already know this story is more than just another reality show plot twist. This one cut deep. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update, and as you listen, let me know in the comments how this moment affected you, because I know I'm not the only one still processing it. When we first met Garrison, he was just a kid in a massive plural family trying to find his place among all the chaos. Over the years, fans watched him grow into someone thoughtful and independent. He was one of the older Brown boys and always seemed to carry this quiet strength, stepping up when things got hard, looking out for his younger siblings, even standing up to his dad when he felt it was right. He wanted a life of his own. He joined the National Guard. He bought his own house in Flagstaff. In 2021, he started working security and talked about going into nursing. He was making moves, building something for himself. He wasn't just a background character. He mattered, but the cracks had already started forming long before. If you watched season 18, you saw it. The tension between Garrison and Cody wasn't subtle anymore. It was raw, and it was personal. Garrison and his brother Gabriel had felt the distance from Cody growing wider, especially after CO hit. While Cody tried to enforce strict household rules, it was clear he was only enforcing them in one place, Robin's house. Garrison pushed back. He questioned his father, and in response, Cody backed further away. By the time season 18 aired, it was clear whatever bond they once had was broken. The man who always claimed to be the family's leader was no longer showing up for some of his kids, and that wound, that absence, never healed. This wasn't just a falling out, it was a fracture that left one son adrift, searching for connection in a family that felt more splintered than ever. As Sister Wives fans, we've always known that not everything on screen is sunshine and togetherness, but watching the Brown family fracture in real time has been painful, and nowhere was that fracture more obvious than in the relationship between Cody and his older sons, especially Garrison and Gabriel. What was once just subtle tension slowly morphed into full-blown estrangement, and the show didn't hide it. In fact, by the time we got to season 18, it was playing outright in front of us on camera. In their own words, Garrison, who had once been close to his dad, became more and more vocal about feeling ignored. He said it out loud. He didn't feel like Cody cared. There was one scene that stuck with so many of us where Garrison admitted he had stopped trying. He wasn't going to chase a father who wouldn't show up. It wasn't just teenage rebellion. This was years of feeling unseen. And Gabriel, he cried in his confessional. Fans will never forget that heartbreaking moment when Gabriel shared that his dad had called him on his birthday, not to say happy birthday, but to talk about COVID protocols. Gabriel had to remind his father what day it was. The pain in his voice was unmistakable. That wasn't just disappointment, that was heartbreak, the kind of wound that stays with you. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the favoritism, because we saw it over and over. Cody didn't hide it. His time, his attention, his presence, it was all centered around Robin and her children, while his older kids were out on their own, going to school, working, building their lives. Cody was hunkered down with Robin, claiming it was all about safety during the pandemic, but that safety didn't extend equally to every household. He chose one home, one wife, one set of kids, and everyone else was left outside. Janelle, Garrison, Gabriel, even Christine, they all said it. This wasn't about CO, this was about control, and it showed the family that once sat side by side on couches, laughing and trying to hold it together, was now split into fragments, and the cameras captured every uncomfortable pause and every pained expression. What made it all worse was Cody's reaction. Instead of reaching out, instead of trying to rebuild those broken relationships, he blamed his sons. He called them disloyal. He accused them of betrayal. It was shocking to hear him speak about his own kids with that kind of distance, as if the only thing that mattered was whether they respected him enough. He demanded their loyalty, but offered no warmth, no real empathy in return. So, when we talk about Garrison's death, we can't ignore this backdrop, this emotional void that stretched for years. Garrison wasn't just another adult child with a strained parent relationship. He was a young man publicly rejected by the person who was supposed to love him unconditionally, and in those final seasons it became impossible to ignore how isolated he truly felt, not just from Cody, but from the family that had once been marketed to us as one big loving unit. March 2020, for the moment the news of Garrison Brown's passing broke, it sent a shock wave through the Sister Wives community. Fans who had followed the show for over a decade were stunned and then devastated. We had watched Garrison grow up on our screens, from a sweet, funny boy in a crowded house to an ambitious young man carving out his own future. The loss hit hard. It didn't feel real at first, but the reality settled in quickly, and what followed was a heartbreaking look at how differently this tragedy was handled within the Brown family. Janelle's grief was immediate, visible, and painfully raw in the interviews she gave after, and even more so in the moments captured by the show. You could see it in her face. This was a mother absolutely shattered. There was no performance, no guarding of emotion. Her voice would crack when she spoke about Garrison, her eyes swollen from crying. This wasn't someone trying to hold it together for the cameras. This was a woman living every mother's worst nightmare. The footage where she talked about Garrison's life, his goals, and her helplessness in those final weeks, it was unbearable. Janelle loved her son fiercely, and she never made excuses about how hard things had become. She owned the pain. She said she wished she'd seen the signs sooner. She wished she could have done more. And then there was Cody. When Cody finally spoke publicly about Garrison, the tone couldn't have been more different, detached, cold even. There was no trembling voice, no tearful pause. He made a comment about wishing he could have had drinks with Garrison, that they could have shared a laugh. It was a strange, hollow thing to say, especially knowing that alcohol had played a role in the tragedy. Fans were stunned, some were outraged, others just sad. How could a father sound so far away from the pain of losing his own son? It felt like Cody was more focused on how things fell apart than the fact that Garrison was gone. He spoke in vague regrets, no specifics, no true ownership, no urgency. And this wasn't just viewers projecting emotion onto a quiet man. The difference between his reaction and Janelle's was stark. Cody's detachment only amplified Cody's response, left many wondering if he ever truly knew the boy he'd lost. Garrison wasn't just another casualty of the family's breakdown. He was a young man who died feeling disconnected from the one person who should have fought the hardest to stay close to him, and for many viewers that truth was harder to swallow than anything else. When someone passes away, especially unexpectedly, their belongings, finances, and property can't just be handed out or taken over. There's a legal process that steps in. It's called probate, and in the case of Garrison Brown, it was a necessary step to make sure everything he left behind was handled properly and respectfully. Garrison owned a home. He had responsibilities. He was living an adult life with bills, tenants, and a mortgage. So when he passed, someone needed to legally step in and manage all of it, and that someone was his mother, Janelle. According to public court documents, Janelle was named the executive of Garrison's estate. That means the court officially recognized her as the person in charge of making decisions about his assets. She was the one responsible for taking care of everything Garrison left behind: his debts, his possessions, and most notably his home in Flagstaff. It's important to understand just how much weight that role carries. While still grieving her son, Janelle also had to make hard practical decisions about his estate. There was no sign that Cody was involved in any of this process, not named in the paperwork, not stepping in legally, and from everything seen so far, not involved in managing what Garrison left behind. This wasn't a dramatic court battle or a public feud. It was a quiet, respectful process handled with maturity and strength. Janelle didn't use it as a spotlight moment. She didn't draw attention to herself. She just did what needed to be done, and she did it alone. Garrison had bought that house in 2021. It was a big step, and for him it meant freedom, maturity, and independence. He had tenants, people renting rooms, so the home was also part of his income. It showed just how serious he was about building a life for himself. But after his passing, it was left to Janelle to manage the house and eventually sell it. The sale went through in December of that same year, quietly, no fanfare, no attention-seeking, just another heavy responsibility shouldered by a mother who never stopped showing up for her son, even after he was gone. And that timeline: buying the house in 2021, working hard to keep it running, and then it being sold after his death, tells us so much about the kind of man Garrison was becoming. Independent, goal-oriented. He wasn't just one of the kids from Sister Wives anymore. He was building something for himself, and it also tells us a lot about Janelle. Through heartbreak, grief, and enormous emotional weight, she didn't disappear. She quietly honored her son by handling the hard parts when no one else did. There's something incredibly loud about silence, especially when it comes from someone who always claimed to be the leader. Cody Brown spent years on Sister Wives telling the world that he was the head of the family. He talked about being the patriarch, about keeping order, about making hard decisions for the sake of the family. But when it truly mattered, when one of his children was gone, when his son's affairs needed handling, he wasn't the one to step up. And no, this wasn't a legal exclusion. Cody wasn't blocked by the court. He wasn't shut out of the process. He simply wasn't there. It was Janelle who took on the responsibility of becoming executive of Garrison's estate. It was Janelle who handled the emotional weight and the legal process, and that silence from Cody, it spoke volumes. This wasn't a storyline written by producers. This was real life. This was a parent's worst nightmare, and when the dust settled, it was only one parent at the table. And for those of us who've watched the show over the years, it stings because we remember the way Cody used to speak, the speeches about being the father figure, the rules he insisted on enforcing, the way he demanded respect, not earned it, but demanded it. But now, faced with the ultimate test of fatherhood showing up when your child can no longer speak for themselves, he was nowhere to be found. It brings up something that's hard to admit, but impossible to ignore. Parental authority means nothing without presence. It's not about who gives the most speeches or who lays down the rules. It's about who's there when everything falls apart. It's about who carries the weight when the rest of the world feels unbearable. It's about action, not image. Cody's absence during Garrison's probate process wasn't just a missed legal step. It was the physical reflection of an emotional distance we saw growing season after season, from the tension with his sons to the fractures in his Relationships we've watched this family split apart on camera, but in this moment, this final irreversible moment, the truth hit even harder. Being a father doesn't stop when the cameras do, and leadership doesn't mean anything if you only show up when things are easy. Cody had a chance to live up to his own words. Instead, he stayed silent, and that silence echoes louder than anything he ever said on TV. Through every season of Sister Wives, Janelle was always the quiet force, never the loudest, never the most dramatic, but always steady. She didn't fight for the spotlight, but she fought for what mattered, and in the wake of losing her son, that strength became even more visible. There were no press releases, no attention-seeking interviews, just a mother doing the hardest work of her life, making sure her son's final affairs were handled with dignity and care. She stepped into the role of executive, not just because someone had to, but because she was the only one willing to carry that emotional weight. It was Janelle who sorted through the legal details, who made sure his tenants were informed, who facilitated the sale of his home, all while grieving, all while still being a mother to her remaining children. She did it all without a title, without recognition, but with grace. This wasn't just a legal responsibility, it was a powerful step in Janelle's journey. We've seen her slowly find her voice. Over the years, we've watched her break free from a marriage that no longer served her, and now, in the middle of heartbreak, she showed us again that strength doesn't have to shout sometimes. It simply gets the job done. This moment wasn't just about loss, it was about transformation. Janelle didn't just manage Garrison's estate, she proved once and for all that she's standing fully on her own now. As we look ahead to season 19 of Sister Wives, there's one thing that's been impossible to ignore: the almost eerie silence around Garrison's passing. For a show that built its foundation on family unity and emotional transparency, this avoidance has left a lot of fans feeling confused, even betrayed. We expected a shift, we expected grief. What we didn't expect was the near total absence of it, while the upcoming episodes tease more tension between Cody and his remaining wives and more tears from Robin about a family she says is falling apart. There is this heavy, unspoken truth lingering in the background. Garrison is gone, a son, a brother, a human being we watched grow up on screen, and yet the show is moving forward like that loss hasn't happened. No dedicated tribute, no meaningful reckoning, just business as usual, and that's left fans reeling. People are talking about it online. They're wondering why the show that once gave us raw, unfiltered moments now feels distant, sanitized. It's hard to watch Cody cry over losing respect from his kids while